Okay, we're live. All right, welcome to X Garage.
X Garage, where what's the
Diving into the crazy world of worldviews with the Christian worldview.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting too easy now. We're gonna have to throw in some I don't know, a couple extra prepositions and some nouns and some adjectives and some more adjectives.
Spice it up. Make sure that we're more specific. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta really specify things nowadays with what our topic is. So Jake the Snake's not here.
Yeah, so we're kind of leaderless. I mean, he's kind of the arbiter of our channel in a way. Like he kind of keeps us in our lines and keeps us going. So Heath and I will kind of be sharing that today and going over Antifa.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what that stands for, Heath? I bring it up.
I do, and actually I have a etymology thing here, quite
sweet,
detailed, which we'll put up probably on our website or somewhere. But with that said, I just realized I don't have my ear things, my plugs in. Can you hear me just fine?
Yeah, I can actually hear you just fine. You're not echoing or anything like that, so it's good.
Great. Okay, so yeah, did you do some etymology on this name?
I didn't do much, but I mean, I looked at
there's how.
Yeah, there's not much to it. I mean, I know that there's like it's very much they're anti-fascist,
yeah,
and that's very much embodied in their name.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at, like, I got excited as soon as I realized some of it. You know, anti. You got the Greek, right? The preposition.
Yeah.
And there's a Latin preposition as well with it, but I think it's from the Greek. I don't. It's one site has it. It seemed actually a little more well done, straight from the German. Another one had a little bit of the what is it? Italian with the second half. So fascism or
okay.
I think it's fascio. I don't know Italian, but yeah. So you got anti and then fascism is basically it. But it's against this whole idea of a hierarchical structure, dictatorship that's basically has the control piece on the national. Actually, this is okay. Yeah. We're going to preface something. We're not have political science majors. Is that the
yeah? We're not political really. We're both theology majors, or we study the Bible. We study theology. Really, this is no way part of our expertise. So we're approaching this simply from a biblical, theological perspective, viewing this ideology purely from that perspective.
Yeah. So what I'm noting, so as we talk, we're going to, and as you see, I got a sunburn. I can't help but see it every time I look at myself. I just caught a little shade of
it. Really doesn't look that bad. Like it's coming through as like a nice tan. Like
4th of July, I was out and got a little bit of a burn. So I always assume, because my family background is Hawaiian and half of my family's Hawaiian Chinese and the other side's all European, that I will somehow never get burned, and I always get burned. It doesn't work for me. Anyhow, with that said, yeah, I was going back to the name here. So fascism, the idea is this dictatorship, but it's not just dictatorship; it's nationalistic or racial-based dictatorship. They claim is what they're really against. Any ideas that would bring about a structure where everyone is controlled by a certain belief and ideology that is hierarchical. You got those at the top, others at the bottom being suppressed, and doing so with a belief of nationalism or racism, which sometimes can be tied together and oftentimes is. That's the idea of fascism. I think groups like probably that are those people would spot out would be like Adolf Hitler in Germany or something.
Yeah.
Or
people would, yeah.
Mussolini was actually probably with the roots of this actually fascism coming out of Europe, was Mussolini and their response against him.
Mm-hmm.
I think, right? Is it? I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a European sort of origination, with specifically focusing in on Adolf Hitler's reign and Mussolini, and just sort of the whole ideology of a supreme race. That's why they're often very, very anti. What is it? White supremacists.
Yeah.
White supremacy. And in fact, I think I was reading something on them. They started in the 1960s. So like pretty shortly after World War II. And they didn't even make it to America until the 1970s. So this group isn't actually that old.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The thing is, it kind of started in more of that pop culture, street culture against the white supremacy that was coming into the punk rock movement and all these other movements in America. It didn't become what it is, and we see today in the current stream, where it's actually, it seems to, I might be jumping the gun here on like just, before we critique, let's,
yeah.
I was going there.
Yeah. No, I was going to go there too.
And another preface is that there's not much on the internet, obviously, that is really descriptive of the group. Like, again, because they like to have things a little bit covert. Not that a little bit, but everything covert. They like to have that. But as much as they have been in the eye of any event, people have drawn on information about them and some comments here and there about their group and organization, going back from where it started over in Europe, etc. So there's things that we know, and then there's a lot that is just left undone because they aren't explicit about their beliefs, their fundamental philosophy. But we do have general stuff. And the one thing I was going to say about the pop, kind of, they see if I can find it here.
Just to interject here, so we just got a comment from Devin Fox saying, didn't Karl Marx say that when you're in a communist nation, the government becomes what the people worship? That would be awful, LOL. And I mean, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's a really good assessment. Do you say the government becomes what the people worship?
Yeah, in a communist nation. And I mean, yeah, and you can see that. And so in a way, that's why we're kind of taking up this idea of Antifa, especially since it's so much in the public eye right now. And their goal is to bring about cultural Marxism with the ultimate goal of taking over the government into a communist ideals, or convert the government into communist ideals. Yeah.
And like we were talking about before, some of them wouldn't identify with communism. There are those within this, they call it, how we're going to have to get there. This is, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah.
It's not an organized group. I think we're going to have to beg to differ on that. But there are differences within the group. One thing is that some claim more of a socialistic standing, which, as we were talking about, really is a moderate form that is ultimately, if you're going to be consistent, you're going to go to communism. I don't know all the nuances, but I'm almost certain, without being a major on this topic, that is the position. Communism, that would ultimately, is where it all goes. And I think you had mentioned something of that. But the thing is, so it starts off in America with this kind of this real. It wasn't really that deeply involved in all of the major political structures, but it was really a focus on, again, that street pop level white supremacy movements against white supremacy. And then today's Antifa, as we've seen in the last 5 to maybe 10 years, I don't know. Again, this is not our topic. I'm going to keep saying that throughout because this just isn't. And we didn't, Yes, we've done a lot of peripheral studies, but today's Antifa has widened their cause of their what they would call direct action, or their indirect and direct action, where they will do anything to get their point across. They've widened it from just this whole white supremacy ideas to actually, it seems to be just right-wing ideas in general, such as, like American values. If you hold American values such as the Constitution, you're almost then identified as, if you go into a secular or just a state university and go in there to talk about the Constitution, upholding it, you're going to probably find, I wouldn't be surprised to find some Antifa groups out there trying to shut down your speech. Upholding traditional family unit, because they see that as suppressing other values. So pro-life or etc. So it's not just about this idea of things that were identified with fascism, but now they're just getting into every area of just moral thinking has to be in line with their thinking. Otherwise, again, if you're not worshiping that thinking, you need to be essentially shut down. That's what I'm gathering from. They've kind of blurred the lines between what is far right or extreme right, as it's said within political, the pendulum there. And they've qualified everything, a lot of things as far right ideas, and then to the extreme that you're qualifying honoring the Constitution with nationalism, racism, fascism, and white supremacy. Anyway,
and in a way, you'd almost have to say, well, let's follow the money and see why they've changed that, and like maybe it is. It's
that's good.
Maybe going back to that in some way they see the Democratic Party as the best way to complete their goals, which is kind of strange, because if you look at the ideals of fascism, with eradicating races and killing the weak of a society, those are things that actually the Democratic Party seem to be more upholding, giving their ideas on assisted suicide, their ideas on abortion. And this is like one of the main inconsistencies that you can continually see pointed out on the internet concerning these, I guess you could call them neo-Marxist movements, or cultural Marxism, which is basically what this Antifa is striving for. Once again, we have Devin Fox saying, "Wow, I wonder if that's why Christians are being condemned in China," and that's absolutely right. The main thing concern with communism is that the people will not be worshiping the government as the arbiter of truth and justice and all these different things.
And it really does if we're going to talk about their metaphysics and their philosophy, and I don't know everything about this group. Please, I want this group to write their own systematic theology. You could start off with, we don't know if there's a God. That's still part of theology. Okay. So write it out for everyone. But the idea that for them, they want this communal structure. And yet what we just noted with China running off of this idea, it's not communal by any sense. It's really a limitation, and the only people that have the freedom, and it's not even a true freedom, because you can't even think against the ideals of the day. If you do, you're shut down. So I mean, so it's really actually it's the antithesis of which it claims to be. If you want a more communal society, you should have what, again, we have in the Constitution, the amendments of things like freedom of speech, freedom of the press. You don't have that going on in communist socialist structures.
No, and it's because the hierarchy is incredibly strong, actually, within that system. You have the rich are actually extremely rich, and then there's just the general public. You have those who are in leadership, who strive for leadership, who scratch the right backs, and they end up on the top, and then those on the bottom. And the problem is it's it's a test. It's a system that's been tested again and again throughout history, and it continually fails.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those ironic thing that they just keep beating that dead horse. But the thing is it's once again, it's right here. Maybe I'm going to critique again, but
we're there. We'll go back and forth.
Yeah, is they keep falling into this idea of that humans are inherently good, or inherently good, not inherently, inherently good, and the problem with that is that the reason for government is to suppress evil. That's the reason God put it into place. And if you create a form of government that does not suppress evil, then you've created a form of government that is not realistic to human nature, which is inherently evil, and will tend towards evil things.
Yeah, that's
and,
good.
And so you end up with this system of government that just it's not going to work.
And I think that's why all governments, no matter where you're at, there has to be they have to be subject to a law themselves, i.e., God's law. There's no law apart from God. If God doesn't exist, there is no law. It's all arbitrary, right? We're even saying that. As soon as you have a government ruling the law of the land, it becomes arbitrary to how they feel as a small group of people and what they want to dispense to the rest. And to what extent people can even speak into that, I don't even know at that point. Once you've established a government in that way, like you said, time and time and again, it doesn't prove to be fruitful. But they ultimately, we have to be subject to laws that are abiding over all of us. We as Christians, we understand that it's because God created us in his image. He created the world a certain way. And as image bearers in general, even those who are not saved or have come to faith in Christ, which he calls us all to, and that's where the gospel is universal. People forget that. Jesus called all to himself.
Yeah.
And he calls all to repent and come under his ruleship, which is good. But he's God. He's the lawgiver. He's the one who spoke forth the world. John 1, 1 through 14, Colossians 1, Hebrews 1. But when you have a fallen men or women in seats of power like that, dictating law, you're going to have groups suppressed. You're going to have thoughts suppressed. You're going to have race suppressed. You're going to have all these things will come up because there's no standard by which to keep them accountable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No?
And there's no checks and balances. There's no, there's just nothing holding anyone down. I mean, there needs to be some sort of line of authority, check and balances, if you're going to make a government work properly within the sinful human nature concept.
And that's important. The fallenness of humanity, that's clear, which again confirms the Christian worldview and our need for Jesus. We live in a fallen world. And I think that's something that these worldviews don't understand. A lot of times they're not, well, they don't, a lot of the philosophers behind these systems that a lot of people are buying into, they were working from the fallenness of man. They're really working from probably more of like the clean slate idea or something else that makes it as though humanity is starting to arrive at a deeper humanity, and thus humans have this ability to bring about the greatest condition that we can. And so it's this idea that we're no longer looking to God, we're just looking to ourselves as we progress. It's just an I relationship. There's no I thou, I God. It's just us, and we are the ultimate truth. And so they're not even working from a framework that would understand their own intentions, really. I'm talking again about the philosophies that are built. They don't have a place for understanding the intention of the human heart that is equally wicked. In other words, and by that, a lot of people are like, what does that mean? By that, I mean, we've rejected God's authority. Yeah. We have our own authority now in our minds, and we live our lives by that authority. We will only take laws that are over us so long as we desire to receive it. Otherwise, we'll reject it. In other words, we are taking the seat of God.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, we're worshiping ourselves. We're setting up governments that is placing humanity in the seat of divinity. Anyway, I feel like I'm going on because I'm not articulating the heart of my thought, but I think we get it somewhat across.
Yeah, I know, and I think that what you're saying is perfect. So, once again, Devin is touching on another interesting subject.
Oh, yeah.
He seems to be the one who's commenting on our stuff. So, thank you, Devin. He says, "What is crazy to me about a lot of higher level Democrats identifying as Christian/Catholic, yet back abortion among a lot of other things. Not to say they are fake followers. It's strange to me. Not to say that they're
That's good.
not to say that they're fake followers. So
right. It's a good distinction.
this is something that we really need to address. Is even me, like some of my friends from the college days, like I went to Moody with, I went to theology classes with, some people I grew up with on the mission field. A lot of these people are totally buying into these ideas. I'm sorry to lump it all together, but unfortunately, a lot of them are born out of the same ideas. Ultimately, a lot of these are, I mean, obviously, they're all born out of our sinful nature. The fact that we are sinful and that the world is trying to get us to sin, and that we have these spiritual assault on our flesh as well, causing us to sin.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I interject there?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think too. And this is a. I say this as more of a template, maybe, or an analogy, but I do think, in many ways, we are a lot of what we've seen in Christianity over the last, say, 100 years or so. Is that we've grown up in a culture that is so engulfed in a lot of world unbiblical understanding of life, philosophies and systems that have gotten into education, and it's really infiltrated many areas of our life, and big time with media, movies, and etc. Where Christians are actually the time of the judges type thing, where there are, I think, believers who have, like is mentioned by Devin, is they've bought into ideas that are not distinctly Christian, unwittingly, and again, whether it's a sin of omission or commission, it's sin, and and it affects our lives, but we're not aware of that. The fact that we're saying we're Christian, yet we're holding a view that is not Christian. And we see that throughout the judges. We see these, everyone does what is right in their own eyes. Even the people of God at the time were not upholding Torah. They were not upholding the law. They were not, and that was the story of it. That's why we need Jesus and grace. But the whole point is it was worse, that the quality of life and the obedience was worse. And a good, faithful believer at that time was not really or not faithful, but faithful in the sense of they were seeking the honor of the Lord, but were not perfect. A lot of that we have to think about in the context of the depravity, the condition of the time. And so I think it still doesn't. God raises up great men and women to serve Him in the midst of the most depraved conditions of society, like Noah. Yeah. But I would even say Noah was obviously not perfect, but by grace he was counted righteous in his generation. But the idea then is still, there's no excuses, but we still got to understand our context. We're raised and born in a really distorted generation.
Yeah, reality. And something I've just been thinking about, especially today, is the idea of I guess you could say the experiment of America, is this idea of a lot of persecution going on over in Europe at the time of especially the Pilgrims coming over. The Pilgrims coming over, they were Reformed, people from England who were living in the Netherlands, because of the freedom of religion in the Netherlands, but they didn't like the cultural appropriation that was going on in the Netherlands, and so they end up moving to the United States to found this idea of religious freedom. And I feel like we are just now in America seeing the death of that, slow death of that religious freedom, through this idea of Marxism, and all these ideas of Marxism, which are all sort of based in Darwinianism, which a lot of them are birthed out of that idea, where we've supplanted God, or supplanted religion, with another religion, basically a religion that is completely centered around man, and that we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and achieve this idea of utopia, which of course also echoes back to, I don't know if you ever read Utopia.
No.
I remember. Yeah, it was a book written, I think, way back. It's 1500s. I'd have to look it up. It's an old book. I read it. It's not very long, but it actually means no place, and it's basically this idea of creating a place where everything actually works. And America wasn't founded on that. America was literally founded on this fact of people just wanting to get away from religious persecution. And now we have this idea of now what do we do as Christians, as we are getting encroached on by social pressures. And there's two things that we can do. We can give in to those social pressures, or we can resist them. And if we resist them, ultimately we're going to be hated, and we're going to have that issue. But if we give into these social pressures of our culture, things are going to be easier for us. But we're going to have to give up some fundamental beliefs of Christianity, including our views on feminism, our views on the sanctity of life, even base ideas of God's sovereignty in creation, of how he created the world, and all these different things, or even just the state of man as just a whole, like our state of man before God and the necessity for a savior.
Yeah.
Maybe that's good.
I'm moving back, and I just slipped my mind. What would you, just to get my mind back on that, because I wanted to touch back on that with a thought. How would you summarize that? Basically, Christians losing a lot of. I think essentially you end up losing Christ. You end up losing Christianity. Christ has commanded it.
Yeah.
And the thing is I've written quite extensively for certain reasons on the topic of how Christians respond in the midst of, and many have throughout the centuries. So a lot of the positions I hold, which is like about 3 or 4 on how Christians go about this. And I guess, and again, how you go about something, there's multiple ways you can do that and still be within the Christian and biblical worldview, how you go about responding to government. Because there's various Christian beliefs that really respond to how to go about our place with relation to the world in different ways. Oh, yeah. And I think Christians can respond. I just want to give this as a kind of maybe a practical help, and a biblical. It's grounded in Scripture. One is pray. And that would be more the pacifists will tend to just pray for the world. And that's the Quakers in some groups, where they're not going to go out and get engaged deeply into politics. Maybe they. I don't know where they're at currently. Historically, I don't believe that's the move. But then there's Christians that are will then use the laws within which they are being governed by to speak out, whether it's verbally. So one thing we can do is to uphold these values and to share them, because they are actually values. I think if we communicate them well, a lot of those who are foreign at them can respond to them in their conscience and understand, that is That seems a little more logical and right, you know.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean they're going to become Christian, but they're going to see that yeah, okay, that we're created with equal dignity and honor. Human. That's distinctly Christian.
Yeah.
Distinctly biblical Christian worldview, Genesis 1 through Revelation 22. And so these values, I think if we communicate them well in our culture, that too can honestly be, I think that's the most powerful thing, is when we can confront others with biblical truth in a meaningful way that shows we care for them, care about their salvation, care about truth. And then there's the extent to which this is like that third step. So you got prayer, you've got communicating with other image bearers the truth of God's word, which God's Spirit uses to change hearts, and he also uses it to actually just give grace to the unbelieving world to understand and just get the benefits, and there's no salvation there, which is sad, but
no, it is, yeah,
grace. But then there's a step of being activists in the sense of more that revolutionary effect, which we see more with guys like who's that with Germany and with Hitler, and the book, the autobiography written recently, Bonhoeffer.
Bonhoeffer, yeah.
Yeah, so there's been some Christian positions getting more politically involved, and I think when you have, and for this position, it's when you have an entire nation following an unruly emperor, and you have a group of image bearers agreeing that this is an unjust rule, then you're not acting solely in retaliation, but you're acting justly as a form of government bringing judgment on another on a unjust ruler. And in that sense, it's been many and would argue that's a justified way of bringing about change, is to overthrow something like. But again, that was done on a national level. That was just a little group. It was just everyone understood what was going on in Germany was absolutely against human dignity and value in life and all that is good and precious.
Yeah.
So all that to say, that's just three quick ones, but there are just many ways to navigate it and how we should. I think we can respond. I think we're with what's going on with in our culture. I think we do need to just be really clear in our values and communicate them. I don't know. I'm going on and on. Maybe we've gone off on a tangent.
I know. No, but I think it's a good tangent because it really does speak into what is going on right now with the Antifa movement, the emergence of neo-Marxism, the violent revolts. We got another comment from Devin Fox.
Yeah.
Who, if you want to read it, you can go ahead. If you can see it.
No, you got it. You're leading that.
Okay. He says, that's awesome. Dr. Turek says something very similar. Without death or the fallen world, we don't need Christ to save us. This gives me a lot of comfort when thinking about how broken the world is right now. And yeah, and for a Christian, it does bring us a lot of comfort, because we understand that this thing called sin, eventually it rises up and it corrupts. And us as a church, we should have been rising up before that, but it's our moment to rise up as well and continue to be the salt of the earth. And it's interesting. I've talked a lot about government and the churches, or thought about and read a lot about government and the church's reaction to government in a lot of things as well. So Heath, you and me, I guess we have a common search for trying to figure out how to react to those things. And really, like, there are so few commandments in the Bible specifically concerning these things. I mean, there's quite a few, but like there's very specifics, like taxes for one thing. Like, we continue to pay taxes. I feel like no matter what, that shouldn't be something that we stop. Right. I mean, you look at the government that Jesus was talking to at his time when he said, well, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It was a government that was quite corrupt, quite pagan, I mean, it was actually very, very much government worship at that point. I mean, as the emperor was the god of that society. Um, and obviously, you mentioned praying for our government.
Mm-hmm.
That's another commandment. And then a lot of people point to Daniel, which I think is actually a very interesting study
Mm-hmm.
for our reaction to government. But looking at Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those are some great ones. There is a point where they stop
Right.
following mandates of the government. In Daniel's case, it's when he continues to pray despite the national mandate to not pray. And with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it's not bowing down to this representation of the Babylonian government at that time. And I think that's important for Christians because I think that's probably the best picture we have as Christians living in a world not of our own. Like we the Bible talks pretty explicitly that we're not citizens of this world. Ultimately, we're citizens of heaven once we are in Christ. But we still exist in this world, and we still enjoy the structure that government brings to suppress sin. And when a government ceases to do that, then we get those points of contention,
Right.
like Bonhoeffer,
And
like you were
and that's
saying.
an important distinction. I like this. I'm not. Well, this is fun. This is for the theologians out there. I'm not
Yeah.
dispensational per se, but I do like
Mm.
this. What the dispensationalists have emphasized in the after the Noahic period is the establishment of governance. That God
Mm.
actually is the one who established governance during this fallen state of humanity.
Mm. Yeah.
So when we see even emperors ruling a people, and they're not saved emperors, they're
Mm-hmm.
actually they're even established to bring about civil society such that it's not just bringing us into the qualitative extent of sin that would be unbridled to the extent that no one could survive. That's essentially
Yeah.
where we would go if God's grace wasn't at work through judicial purposes and through human our hearts and
Mm.
sustaining our knowledge, our minds, however one wants to go about it anthropologically. It's all God's grace working in
Mm-hmm.
mercy. Mercy might be the better word.
Yeah.
Just and so when we look at human governance, period, at this point, is because of the fall. It's not just some strange thing we started. And you see that in, I believe, Genesis 9. I haven't 9 and 11, 9 or 11 or through 11. I can't remember
Mm.
or quote perfectly at the moment. But all that to say, just a reminder there for viewers and for us is just to be encouraged that even when you live in a society with laws, like you're saying, we should submit to them, pay your taxes, do these
Mm.
things. Good. These are for God. God established for just purposes. Romans 13. Is it 13? Correct? Not 14, right? 13.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And um, uh, and yet there are moments where governance goes to the extreme to where it then commands things like you just mentioned, Ethan, that are completely unbiblical, like worship the emperor for an extreme one, deny Christ.
Yeah.
At that point, you just keep worshiping the Lord. And
Yeah.
you're right. I think Daniel is such a great example of that blend, where you see it open up in first few chapter of Daniel, where he actually knows their literature, he knows their worldview, he could teach it, and he was teaching it.
Yeah.
And we should be out there as Christians knowing the worldviews of the day such that we could teach it, such that we don't even allow our presuppositions to misinterpret their literature, which is going back to Antifa. I think maybe we can touch back on some points here. I think there's a lot of these groups that are misinterpreting other groups just to buy their narrative.
Yeah.
Daniel doesn't do that. Daniel is a firm worshiper of the Lord, the true God, and he knows their stuff. He can teach it. They enjoy him. God graces him by that. And then yet he still won't bow down and break God's law. And so I think there's a way to be Christian in a fallen world that supports the world, and and if God wills us to endure some persecution of some sort, we do it faithfully.
Yeah. exactly.
But I want to touch on that real fast. Can I switch this topic?
Oh, absolutely. Should we just end our session, or we can just start another one? We could go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Right.
So thank you for listening to this episode of X Garage. We're gonna go on to our next subject.
And thanks, Devin, for these comments.
Oh, awesome.
Hope you haven't left yet, because these have been so good. Yeah. X Garage.
X Garage.
We'll be right back next week.
All right. So yeah, we can just go ahead and we can just start the next one.
Okay.
Yeah. Welcome to X Garage.
Welcome.
I'm O. Henry, and here we are again.
Yeah,
for those who are watching us live, you get us just smack dab right next to each other. If those who are going to be listening to these weekly, you're so welcome to continue to listen to this.
Welcome to X Garage, where we dive into the crazy world of is that
worldviews?
Worldviews,
yeah,
Christian worldview.
Yeah, the Christian worldview. Yeah,
cool.
Hopefully not as crazy as the other worldviews. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We'd argue that that's not the case. It's very consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
And with that said, we've been talking about our topic is Antifa.
Yeah.
And basically anti-fascism. So if you haven't watched episode 1, please do that, and then come to
it'll explain a lot. Yeah, where we're going, where we at.
There's a lot of crazy trails we go on. So, but we want to start this off talking about their method for change, Antifa's methodology for change, and then and then looking at they do have this. I actually had fun with this. I entitled it ecclesiology, the study of the church.
Oh, really?
Church. Specifically, is it an organization or is it not? That's the real big debate right now, it seems. But let's touch on methodology real fast. This probably won't take us long, but I thought this was interesting. Their political approach for change is through both nonviolent and violent measures in order to promote their ideology, their political positions and agenda. And this would include things, it's not exclusive to it, but it would include damaging property. I'm not even sure how exact they are on whose property they're damaging, if that's thought out. I think it probably...
Especially from their ideology, there's no property, right? So
maybe that's the case. No property. In fact,
it could be their property at that point.
You damage their own property.
Yeah.
But I guess it's not theirs yet. Oh, man, we're going right into critique.
Yeah. Oh, we're bad. Okay, let's keep
That's fine. That's fine. It's after the July 4th, and I've got a sunburn, and there's no excuses.
Yeah.
So property, disrupting speaking engagements, destroying opposed symbols that oppose their position. Oftentimes,
it makes sense.
Literature, destroying it. Get rid of it completely. I think that's actually sad, and we could talk about that a bit.
Is.
I think I want literature that opposes my view. I read people. I enjoy. Let me get. I do enjoy people who I disagree with. It helps even fine tune my own convictions and thinking. And
no. I was reading a quote today. It went something along the line of heresy is one of the greatest things for the church, because it helps us to better hone and what is it? Just make our view more detailed about certain topics.
Oh, yes. You find out it's through heretical views that you brings up church councils, which help us distinguish what we have believed in such fine language that it clarifies what was being brought against it. And I think you're right. That is. It's beautiful, and I think and I think there's always something to gain by people we don't even agree with.
No, even not at all. Like I think the German government still has the rights to Mein Kampf, and I think they still make money off of it. So there's a little gem of a fact.
Good little gem there for this topic, and then so I said destroying symbols, literature, physical violence, which we've seen lately. And then extreme verbal abuse toward again, this is all toward those who oppose their values. And as
wow.
as we went over in the first video, their values have shifted from not just white supremacy or racist groups or just fascism,
Yeah.
but it has shifted into a broader range of things, such as pro-life or opposing abortion or
even feminism, I think, is another one of the things. Yeah.
Anthropology, just your ideas on humanity, to actually believe God created male and female, and that they oppose vehemently.
Yeah.
And so they've brought in this idea of extreme right. There's just become whatever they determine, I guess, is
whatever is right in their own eyes, I guess, at the moment.
Yeah.
And I yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people have shifted to describing them more as cultural Marxism, which is more of the idea. If you guys want an excellent sermon on cultural Marxism, look up Vodi Baucham's sermon on cultural Marxism. It's dead on. That man has a, oh man, he's got a good head on him. So yeah, if you want a great thing on that. So oh yeah, we got another comment from Devin Fox. I actually saw someone to try to compare missionaries or imperialists to imperialists. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Oh, that's a whole nother a whole nother bag of worms. So for those who don't know what imperialists are, those are people who basically uphold, correct me if I'm wrong, uphold their state or their government or way of life over someone else's way of life. And I can, as a missionary kid, this one I take personally.
Yeah, I'm giving you room here. I want to hear your
thoughts. Because yeah, and a lot of this did happen, and I will actually say this does happen on the mission field, and I am vehemently opposed to it.
Right. Of course.
Because there's a beauty in so many different cultures all over the world, and these cultures are beautiful cultures that God has created. And some of them, yes, all cultures are corrupted by sin, but that doesn't mean that we should appropriate one culture over another. Now, there is a certain people might say there's a certain culture that the Bible exudes, and I would agree with that. But my grandparents were missionaries in Ecuador. They actually did Bible translation, and they actually preserved the language of the Kofan people in Ecuador through Bible translation. They lexicized the whole world, the whole language, and actually also created a learning curriculum for them. Also, my grandpa was very, very integral in preserving their legends. He actually did multiple translations of their traditional legends, and he also did like hammock making. He made a book on hammock making and a lot of other things that they were doing to preserve their culture. And if you look, what often happens is it's not so much the missionaries that change these cultures; it's actually the industry that comes in the wake of missionaries going in and doing these things. And it's not so much in the wake of, because the missionaries are usually quite integral in getting into these cultures and actually preserving these cultures. And then you have governments pushing in, especially where my grandparents were and my parents now work. It was actually much more oil related. So they're coming in to deal with the oil in the land. Anyways, that kind of gets us on a nice rabbit trail. Thank you, Devin, for getting us on that. That's something I definitely am passionate about, and would love to talk more about.
I think you said it well, and I can summarize some of it too. Just saying there is so much more complexities for someone to simply go out and say, and this happens a lot, and I'm thankful Devin brought this up, where they'll say things like that, where missionaries are basically imperialists, and that's just a wrong statement in many sense, in many ways. Although there may be a particular case that can be argued that way, that's not at all could be argued in any rational or reasonable manner, because the issues were much more deep, complex than that. When missionaries are sent out and other people are involved in the process and hearing about change and etc. I'm not an expert in missionary studies, but I took a couple courses. And when I looked at some of the issues there, a lot of it was beyond just the missionaries themselves. Some of it was even just some of the ignorance of moving into a country you never knew anything about. And you just unwittingly started imposing your culture on another culture, not realizing it didn't really have, it really wasn't essential to the gospel. And so it's just such much more of a much more to it than just a simple this is this. And I think what we can say is it's going back to what you said, there's the aim of mission work is to bring the gospel into a person's life, that God would change their hearts, not their culture, but that their hearts would change. And maybe those cultural maybe they had laws in their culture that were contrary to God's truth, that would be adjusted through the work of his redemption in their lives, but it wouldn't be forced upon them. That would be the aim. Although at times there probably came off, who knows? Again, that's case by case studies.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, for real. And I totally want to echo what you're saying. Like a lot of the times it's born out of culture shock, and someone just is all of a sudden just like, oh man, I just wish it was like in America. And
we do it all the time.
Yeah,
right?
No, we do it all the time. We do it when we go to the south, of America, or we go north or east. All of a sudden we're like, oh man, I wish it was like back home. And it's just normal human reaction. It happens when cultures come together. The beauty of it is that the church can come together and they can have the unity within Christ, within the scriptures. And that's the beauty of the church, is there is a unifying factor through the scriptures and through Christ, and the scriptures say that when we get to heaven, it'll be every tribe and every nation, and that's not talking about skin color or race, things that I know the Bible does not talk about, but it does talk about cultures, and it does talk about tribes, and these are things that I think are people's ethnicity, like their culture, their different way of living, that is beautiful. The diversity of God's creation within man and the world.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to on that point. I'm not going to say much more on that. I think you said well, is just knowing that it's the gospel. Biblically, as we read scripture, the Christian truth is that Christ is king, and all creativity, all dress, all music, all these things are gifts from God, and the diversity is beautiful. And God does is he comes in our hearts to reconcile us to him and one another, and to celebrate and appreciate works of art, works of culture, works of way of life, how you eat your food differently. I don't know, so many things that you can celebrate. But you can't, but again, going back to this idea of communistic or socialistic structures, I think it really does extinguish the diversity of humanity, because you're buying into one view on life, one philosophy that's controlled from whoever's got the seat or the voice. And on that point, I don't know, do you have something to touch up on that before we go into eschatology or ecclesiology?
Oh no. I mean, we got another comment from Devin Fox, but maybe we'll just do a video on this subject later. I think we could go over this. I think it actually touches a lot on if you want some resource for that, Devin Fox, look into, I would say, turn to John 15, chapter 15. That'll give you some insight into that, as well as I think is it 1 John
Yeah.
2 and 3. Yeah.
And there's
Uh,
I mean I could shoot. Well, I was gonna say I can briefly give like 5 different positions within.
go ahead, go for it. You're the expert more on
We
this.
kind of want to stay on. Is this? I guess it's not. It's kind of on topic.
It's all connected one way
Just
or another.
remind those who are listening to our podcast, this is on Antifa. Okay, so
And this is the rabbit. Okay.
yeah, this is a good topic. So the question is for remote tribes that have no contact with society, if they die before they hear the gospel, where do they go? And no, yeah, it's all good, Devin. So
No, that's awesome.
there's been various positions on that. Traditionally, it is that we have the Reformed. Again, there's so many nuanced positions. I can't even just say Reformed. People who claim to be Reformed that kind of have nuances. But I will say, historically, it has been is that we've all fallen in Adam. That no one deserves eternal life. No, not one. And so as the gospel goes out, it is bringing forth life into those hearts and minds, and otherwise the rest are going in Adam to judgment. For Adam's choice was no different than the choice I would have or could have made in the garden, if given that Adam was the perfect head. That position has been hard for some to get, and so they've gone other routes to where God has revealed himself in conscience through creation. That is, that through creation that God has revealed himself to an extent to which by his Spirit, again, working with his Spirit, not just any spirit, but the Holy Spirit works through creation to unreached people groups to reveal himself to them, such that they do believe in the true God. And when a missionary shows up, if they don't, in this case, you proposed, either way, the Spirit does call them by election. Whether that election was by God's foreknowledge of their decision, or that election was that God just foreknew that person, that being Calvinism. He knew their decisions as well, but in Calvinism, he knew that they wouldn't choose him. But yet God still showed him grace and came and redeemed him and brought his Spirit to him. Anyway, all those nuances. There's many ways in which we can deal with the topic as Christians that are still biblical. However, I do hold closer, if I worded it right, I hold to the first view. That's me personally. I think it's important the gospel goes out to the nations, because that's the means by which God has chosen to redeem and reconcile hearts to himself. Can God work in many other ways? Yes, he can, but that's not knowledge to know. He hasn't revealed that. I don't know. Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, no, I want to echo that. As the fact is they do, knowing this from personal interaction with the Kofan people, is they definitely suppress the knowledge of God in their unrighteousness, or suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And a lot of them knew of a great spirit in their spiritism, and they knew of a God, and it's one of those subjects. It's hard because you want to say, well, where's the justice of God in this? But I mean, the scripture is clear that through nature, just the wonder and the knowledge that they can get through nature is enough to condemn them. It may go ahead.
This is great. So thanks, Evan. What we'll do is we'll do a full on. We have to put this on paper somewhere so we don't.
Oh yes.
But we got to do a full on topic on this subject, because I think it is important and it relates to what we're doing here. So
yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
Go ahead, you read it.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, many other religions of stories of great flood wiped out much of the world. Yeah, thanks, Holly, for that. And that, once again, we'll just add that to the list of things to discuss.
Yeah, and that's because, again, I just want to quickly throw something out, but we can discuss.
Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah.
That, when we get, maybe we'll touch on the same when we do that. But yeah, I would argue that they're going to have a lot of similarities with the biblical account, because everyone came from Adam, and God dispersed the peoples at Babel. So they're all sharing the same line, same story, and then you see distortions of that story through these other world religions.
Yeah, you just look at the Sumerian versions of the flood, like directly after the flood, and they're already versions of, they're already distorting it. putting other people in place of the different characters. And
so I think go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. You're good. I was just done. You're good.
Questions. And it actually verifies the biblical account of the flood, the global flood. And it actually confirms that God is just in that He desires holiness, and it actually brings us to the cross. That He will not judge the world by a flood again, and He hasn't since. He's confirmed that again by putting the bow in the sky. But beyond that, His faithfulness to preserve us this long, not to flood us, not to destroy us until the second coming when Christ returns to judge the living and the dead, by which there'll be a new creation, etc. But I think that's a wonderful note. That's a wonderful point, Holly, to touch on, is that there's a lot of commonalities in religions, but it doesn't mean that these commonalities thereby qualify all religions as equally true. And I think that's an important thing to note, because what we hear a lot in today's age is this idea of syncretism and everyone has truth, but that's actually, you see that these are distortions of the truth, and they're not actual true narratives. If you follow out their narratives, if you follow out the biblical narrative, you'll find that there's completely coherency and consistency. And the God in that narrative is the greatest conceivable being. Yeah. The other narratives, that falls completely out. Especially when we go back to these creation stories.
Oh yeah, creation or flood stories. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I talked about my grandpa doing a translation of their legends. Yeah, they have a flood story. They actually even have a creation story in their narrative as well. So another just interesting rabbit trail note.
Okay, man, this is awesome. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Devin, so far. If you got more of them, throw them out there. We're going to touch on them as we go through this next section here. As Ecclesi, where are we at on time? I didn't see the time.
Yeah, we're about at 20 minutes, I think.
Okay,
so we're good.
Okay, so is Antifa a church? Just joking. I'm just having fun with the words. Ecclesia or ecclesia in Greek and kahal in Hebrew just means a gathering of people, and not God's people. Right. But
we'll go there.
Yeah, I just want to have fun just to categorize it in my mind. But the thing I noticed is, okay, so Wikipedia continued to, almost like an argumentative essay, say, but they're not an established organization, which was interesting because in encyclopedias, information-based sources are not supposed to write as argumentative. And we'll get to that. But I just thought that was strange so anyway, studies suggest that they are not an organization, but a movement sharing common political, civil, social interests with shared approaches on reform. Now, that's my summary from various sites and studies that I've gathered and inconsistencies and whatever. So basically, they just share a lot of information. They share the same cause. They share the same approach, like we just talked about methodology, both aggressive, even destructive, to get change. So what keeps Antifa from being called a united group, organization, or a hall? Just joking. I'm not going to do that. Well, it is their ecclesia. I guess we've been doing that. It's just in their way. This is their way of. This is their body. This is their belief system. This is their way of life. What unifies them? What unifies them is a networking of shared resources. So they have sharing information in basically community interest groups, and then they get together and they go show up places. And so what I found was interesting is, was on Wikipedia, and anyone can go there right now. Last I looked at it was like 2 days ago, real quickly. In each section, there was like 4 sections where they reiterated that they're not, and by the way, they're just a loosely organized organization. They're not an organization.
There's no pope, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no pope. They're not being funded. They're not, none of this. And under political reactions heading, under ideology, under the first heading, Antifa, under movement structure, all these sections, it's literally reiterates loosely affiliated, not a true organization. It's just a movement. Okay. with that said, I'll stop and I'll give you a thought.
Deep breath. Okay.
And again, we're just going straight into observation and critique at the same time. And this is where I see something strange about Wikipedia, because I've been on obviously I've used Wikipedia quite frequently, and they're quick, source where you can just go get some quick names and some things to do some further research. But I've never seen them so on a page. So whoever was doing the editing on it seemed to be writing more of an argumentative essay just on this point. All the other points, they didn't give rebuttals to a statement. So there was a statement under political reactions where it talks about the Trump administration calling Antifa a terrorist group.
Yeah.
And at this point, they'd already said about 5 times that they're a loosely organized group. They're not an organization, something of that nature. I'm paraphrasing. And it says it again in this section, right after it quotes the administration of Trump calling them a terrorist organization, saying, but they're not a terrorist organization. They're not an organization. They're a loosely associated movement rather than a specific organization. And what's interesting is it seems to be, for one, why whoever's editing it, I just would encourage them to double check who the editor is on the page, because it seems to be more of a defense for Antifa than it is an actual just listing. Because why doesn't it follow it up with the reasons for the Trump administration to have that view? But right away, it gives, again, the same language, same grammar, actually, same adverb, or adjective. I don't know. I don't remember. Some of the same language is used in all these sections. Anyway, I don't want to be overly
critical or
and being a hermeneutic type guy, but I would just say it seemed to me that the way it was written suggests that it is actually a organization. And so I don't know, have you studied much on that or heard anything?
Yeah. So in my study into cultural Marxism, it's really interesting because when you have the question of who's pulling the levers, who's El Jefe, who's the mob boss, they are very, very much into this ideology of taking control of the robes, they say. So what does that mean, right? The robes. So the robes is basically anyone who is wearing the robe in our society, right? So they're really going for those who are in education, higher education, and those who are religious leaders. And so when it comes down to it, the leaders of this so-called Antifa, or so-called loose organization that sort of, it has no leadership. It's just sort of out there, just kind of cultural movement, which in a lot of ways it is. A lot of the people who follow this this ideology are really just blind sheep, just sort of like, hey, this looks like a little fun block party where we get to spray paint some buildings and break a few cars. And it's funny, like when you're reading this, sometimes they're violent, sometimes they're not. Well, when did they decide when they're going to be violent or not? But it's this idea of taking over those groups of people, those who are in the robes, and then those people are the ones who appropriate this idea. And as you can see with our very vast liberal college or university life in the United States of America, as well as our extremely liberal public school system. I can attest to that coming out of the public school system. I was a teacher in the public school system. My wife also did a lot of different things in the public school system as well. This is their target. Their target, whoever this person is, or this group of people is it's the cultural appropriation. I think it could be through media, through executives in Hollywood. You can definitely see this cultural appropriation of cultural Marxism going through that, and bleeding its way all the way up to, or bleeding its way down from those who are in these prominent positions, the robes.
Yeah. And I was going to say, as of the data in terms of watching their movement, go about different events and how they're working. Yes, it's true, it's a movement. But on the flip side, an organization, how are we defining loosely from organized? And I think it's really a semantic game that's being played. As you noted, there are people in positions that are united and using their resources to whatever extent they desire, which is what any organization does.
Yeah.
There's no set protocol on how one moves resources, but it's a group together that works together. And really, aside from real semantics, maybe one of our viewers can share with us the important distinction. But as far as I can see and what we know, like you mentioned, there's individuals who actually are key figures, and then you have those who are just buying into it. And when you look at other groups, terrorist organizations and whatnot, it's really just a philosophical, political agenda that goes against another and does so in radical ways, such as damaging. I think I don't know, what is the definition of terrorism? I don't even know. Let's see.
Let's look it up. Let's figure out what terrorism is. Yeah. As you can see, we're once again, we're just saying we're not political majors. So all what we're saying is just out of our own personal interest and research. Yeah, you go ahead. What's the definition?
The unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. I mean, that sounds like Antifa. I'm not an expert on again, like we said, political science, so, but you talk about I guess you have to go not only just terrorism, but terrorist organization. So you got to be organized and and then follow this definition. I don't know what's going on. All of to say, we're not, we just hit the hot seat right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man.
Obviously, they don't see themselves that way. They see themselves as a reformation group trying to establish what they think. Again, this goes back to hamartiology, the study of sin, and eschatology, the end goal, the end times, what's going to happen for them. For them, it seems that their sin, what they think is wrong with the world, is the structures that oppose their values, the political structure as well as moral structures as they define it, and that those need to change. And that for them is the utopia. That's salvation. And I think, again, so in their sight, their mind, they're the saviors.
Yeah.
But that, and that's what we're finding with any world religion, any belief, any individual. No one thinks themselves in the wrong, ultimately, in these fundamental issues. We think we have the right cause until people bring us. Hopefully we'd be able to listen to opposing people to put ourselves in check. And I think with this group, what I'm seeing is they're opposing some of the values that actually give them the ability to speak their minds.
Yeah.
The way in which the United States is established right now, currently, allows them to be free to speak their minds, to go for reforms for their things that they're after, but to do so and damage other people's property and do these things is actually falls into the role of fascism itself. Fascism is the behavior of burning the books, of cutting everyone else off, kicking them to the curb, and not allowing the freedoms for diversity.
Yeah.
So it seems to me it's really strange. And again, we haven't studied much on this, but just a brief overview of it. I think most people are starting to notice, a lot of people, I don't know about most, but whoever's looking at it, it seems the data is showing that ultimately, I just want to encourage our Antifa neighbors out there that the very principles that are in the Constitution are the very things that are giving you the ability to go for reforms and to have the equal dignity and value as human image bearers. These things are good. Don't go wreck a neighbor's car in this society.
Yeah. And I think that's where there's a disconnect. I think definitely is they the idea of cultural Marxism is that they are using the present culture to appropriate their Marxism. but where do they go from there? Like once the society changes, are they just out of a job? Do they just realize that they've just found themselves down at the bottom of the totem pole? The government is no longer able to support them. I you kind of get to that point. I know what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
do they understand what they're giving up?
Yeah. And the thing is, like, okay, you don't like capitalism is another big one they're really against, from what I've seen. And a lot of that's because not having the money dispersed to all and actually having
Yeah.
checks and balances in that manner. And I think the the greater check and balance there is, again, having that freedom to call people to be accountable with their money, not to enforce taking from them or something else. I don't know. There's probably 100 different Marxist views on how to distribute money. I don't know. I not study all of that. But all I would say, I think the view that actually diversifies and gives the most privilege to just being a moral people is the one that doesn't enforce and make unnecessary moves on how to govern a person, apart from making moves that's going to, you want the moves to establish society, but you don't want to do it so far as you start to quench people's ingenuity, their freedom of being them. And it's, basically just wanting to control how an individual does. If they earn the money, they earn the money. And then encourage them to tithe, go to give to an organization, give to an organization. I don't know. But there shouldn't be, if there's any holes in our system where it's just unjust and there's inequality, and like, I think it'd be wrong to tax. I don't know. Again, right now I'm just spitting from the hip.
It's spitting from the hip. It's, I don't know if that would be what that looks like, but
I'm just saying, I just think, well, if the guy or gal makes more, then don't tax them a bunch more. They're still going to have to give out of what they made. It's going to be a lot, like, I don't know, man. I just think some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's once again, like when it comes to political science, it's like, for me, it's just like, man, if I just had to do less paperwork every year for my taxes, I'd be happy. If it was a flat tax, it was like, yeah, 4%. Heck yeah. Like, just let me give the 4%. I'm not like this wealth distribution idea. It just seems like a lot of extra work.
Yeah. And anyway, so I don't know. I don't have another point here. I don't know. End goal, societal structures being changed, etc. We talked about. I don't know. Any closing thoughts?
You know what? I really just want to say, Antifa. I don't know. You can't say they're an entity because they're just a bunch of individuals, right? So, Antifa is a bunch of individuals out there. Those who are following these ideologies, or maybe not even know what these ideologies is. I hope this video helps you. And really, you guys need to realize that it's not going to work. It's not going to work because sin is still a real thing. Now, if everybody was a Christian and we didn't have the sinful nature, yeah, your idea might work. Okay? But it's not realistic. We are all sinful. Corruption's still going to creep in. Giving people more money, it has rarely ever made someone more righteous or better off. Whoa, sorry. Did I just say something? Make someone better than someone else. So run to Christ, become one in Christ. That's the only way to have peace with God, and to live a life that has meaning. And so I hope that can help. Yeah. You have anything to add, Keith?
Yeah. I think, well, no, I mean, not really. I think I just want to confirm and say what you said is just it.
Yeah.
The thing is just, you actually brought something up. I didn't know where to close on. I think you hit it when you said the fallenness of humanity, that there's sin and brokenness in the world. This is objective. The heart, we deal with pride. Pride gets in the way of structures. Doesn't matter what structures you put up. And I think that's why it's important that whatever's done, we we hold and uphold the dignity and value of others. And so to our Antifa neighbors, friends, this group, people, whatever, that you would really maybe come to Scripture and read it as for what it says, and maybe then I would just pray that it would speak to your heart and meet with those injustices, meet with those things that maybe have unsettled you and has led you into this stream of thought, because Christ is all about rectifying all things. Christ is going to restore all things under his kingship. He's ruling and reigning now, saving hearts and lives throughout every generation, and all across all nations, gathering a people and redeeming and reconciling us together to enjoy fellowship and enjoy the riches of life and the fullness of life. As Jesus said, though you die, yet shall you live if you believe in me.
Amen. So that would conclude our X Garage, our second episode on Antifa. Thank you guys so much for joining us. X Garage.
X Garage. Joe.
Do you want to do another one, or do you think that's pretty? We got pretty thorough there.
I think that's pretty good, huh? I don't know.
Yeah,
I think so.
Do we have more?
I don't.
Okay.
I think that's a lot. So
I really want to hear what Jake had to say, because he did a lot more research into.
Are we on YouTube Live? What is this?
We're on Facebook Live.
Facebook, cool. Yeah.
So,
Jake, I would have wanted to hear more from him as well.
Yeah. Just the fact that I think he would have brought a lot more, because I think he was studying a lot more into the Black Lives Matters movement and their connection with Antifa, and and he was going to try to bring some aspect of that, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think he covered a lot more of maybe what's going on in the current stuff going on, current affairs, and then tying it to the Black Lives Matters, and so those are aspects that maybe we can come together for a third part.
Maybe we can catch them sometime next weekend or sometime during the week. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thanks to those who commented, and for Holly and Devin. That was great. Yeah. It's us now, but that was cool. I thought it was good. All right.
Cool. All right. Cool. Ending broadcast.